Today is Monday, March 14. This is the Village of Gulf Mayor's Executive Committee meeting. Mr. Laser, can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Fisher. Mr. Kenneth.
Present.
Mr. Marks.
Here.
Mr. Simile.
Here.
Mr. Van Hart.
Here.
Motion to excuse Mr. Fisher.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
And this is Mr. Marks returning.
Yeah, I was just gonna say welcome to Mr.
Oh,
Marks.
bad.
You stole the words I was gonna say. You just can't stay away. Not that we need you. Now, we're glad you're here. So, wanted to make sure we acknowledge that you're officially appointed since the last meeting, I guess? Okay. So I trust everyone's had a chance to review the agenda. We've got a couple of changes that have come up since our last meeting. Tonight, obviously, we're going to talk about a police vehicle discussion about the PD medical cross training, and we're also going to add a short discussion on aggregation, which is a gas supplier service, correct?
On natural gas specifically.
Right. So that's going to be added at the end of the new business for tonight. That's probably going to cover what we'd like to. So, is there any other changes? Let's see. Well, we have to approve the minutes first. So. And approve the agenda. Okay. All right.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended. Clear.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it's been approved. Now we'll approve the minutes. Everybody had a chance to review them. There's only one small one I didn't catch, so now it says Ms. Snyder, so Mr. Snyder.
Okay, I'll get that right.
Other than that, any other questions or thoughts on the agenda? Or the minutes, I'm sorry.
Motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second?
I wasn't here, so.
Oh, okay.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, been approved. I sign it now. Good to hear.
Can you go ahead and sign that?
Okay, on to new business. We're going to start tonight with a new thing that's come up regarding a vehicle for the police department. And I believe we have Mr. Sergeant Reed here tonight to help us lead that discussion. Officer Reed?
Okay. I get to go first, Jay. So I approached the administrator about abandoned vehicles for the PD for various reasons and various uses. The biggest one for me is my duties take me all around the city of Cincinnati. They take me into Kentucky, take me to Indiana, Columbus, Cleveland, et cetera, et cetera. I have to attend various trainings and conferences to one, better myself, to help better the agency, but also we're getting more aggressive in our recruiting. So I have to attend several academies to basically scout out and try and pick the best to come work for the Village of Gulf Manor. The issues that we've had with that is photographs have been taken of our vehicle all over the city, and then we get questions about why is Gulf Manor vehicle here and not patrolling the village? You know, this is taxpayers wasting money, et cetera, et cetera. And we're trying not to answer those questions because yes, we are doing official business, we're not in the Village of Gulf Manor. When I do background checks on new applicants for the police department, I may go to their neighborhood, interview their neighbors, interview their spouse, things of that nature, and we just don't get one vehicle sitting in these neighborhoods. Also, there's a plan in place with some movement in the PD that this will hopefully help along the fleet and the use and life of our vehicles. With the chip shortage, I am anticipating probably not being able to purchase a vehicle next year. I've been in contact with some of the manufacturers this year, and they're already giving 45 to 50-week lead times. They're not accepting orders anymore. They're saying much of the same for next year, as they're not even sure if they'll be able to fulfill the needs they have currently. In my current role, what we're hoping to do is reappropriate the vehicle I use now, which is a Dodge Ram pickup outside, to the patrol fleet. It's got about 6,000 miles on it. It's pretty much considered a new vehicle. In my role, I only average about 2,000 miles a year. So I don't really need a brand new car to complete my tasks. With that being said as well, I am on call, meaning if I go home at 7 o'clock and there's a shooting at 1 o'clock in the morning, guess who gets a lovely phone call and has to get up and come in? For the past years, I've done that in my personal vehicle. What that means for me is a lot of risk and liability to hurry up and get in here to protect the village from liability. If we have a critical incident and there's no supervisor on scene to direct and command that incident, we're liable for that. I have always made that call. I accepted it gladly and I responded gladly. For instance, Christmas Day, a couple years ago, we had a shooting right in the middle of there with my family. Hey, Sergeant, we got a shooting. You need to get in here. I'll be right there. Another incident in front of the Hebrew Day School. Hey, Sergeant, there's a suspicious package in front of the school. It's a brick wrapped in aluminum foil. That might be C4. I better get in there and call the bomb squad. I dropped everything and I got in there. We've had other shootings. We had the last incident was on Rich Acres. It was a hostage situation. They get dispatched for a well-being check. There's a guy with a gun. Female comes running out. Bail's in there intoxicated, waving a pistol around. He won't let her elderly woman out for residence. Sergeant, need you in here. I'll be right there. 11:30 at night. And the list goes on and on and on. The role I've gladly accepted, and I'm not complaining about it. I'm just asking you to help me do my job. I also have to carry a tremendous amount of equipment that if it's not in my cruiser, it's in my patrol car. And if I can't carry it with me in my personal car, I have to respond here to the PD and collect that gear and then go to the scene. As you know, I'm also a part of SOFAS, which is the U.S. Marshals Task Force. If I get called out for that, I've got to drive in here, pick up some of that gear, and then go out to help them. That's a tremendous resource to us because I can put the same phone call into my guys and have them all come to the village adult I've done it before. I've had them go as far as Dayton to get the suspect for us. So that's just a give or take relationship there. The vehicle that I found, I'm not trying to do anything extravagant, is a 2014 vehicle with about 89,000 miles. Well maintained. It was one previous owner, which was also a government fleet. So it was maintained and serviced. We have those records. I should have them here. My goal would be to get 5 years out of that vehicle, and that would help me tremendously. I keep saying to me, the vehicle specifically would be for me. It would be available to Lieutenant Force if you can with me be, but particularly be primarily assigned to me to assist in my role. So, take your questions.
Okay, so I haven't heard any of this previously, so how many vehicles do we have now in the police department?
We have a current count of 7 vehicles. One vehicle was assigned to the task force. I can talk about this.
So there are 4 patrol cars that include the 2 Durangos and the 2 trucks. One of those is marked as a supervisor car.
That's correct.
Then there is a 5th patrol car that is 216 that is heading towards retirement, but we held on to it as an extra vehicle to keep it in the rotation in case one of the other 4 cars go out.
That's correct. We moved out for service and that vehicle can be utilized.
So that's 5.
That's correct.
Then we have the K9 vehicle. Forrest uses that vehicle. That's his vehicle, essentially. He takes it everywhere. Then we have Chief Campbell's car, which was a new Jeep that was purchased for him 2 years ago, I think now. It seems like it was yesterday, it was 2 years. He uses that as his personal vehicle.
So could that be used for this purpose? If he's not doing the response, does the chief do this same responsibility?
So the chief, generally, in our organization, the chief has always had a vehicle because he has to respond at any time. So that essentially, they both live on opposite ends of Cincinnati, so that's not really practical that they would share that vehicle. The other vehicle that we do have, which doesn't get used that often, you might remember the 2008 Light Escort. The police department and the administration have been sharing that vehicle. That vehicle was paid for, how old is that, 12 years old now?
2008.
It's been paid for a number of years. It really doesn't cost us anything other than the insurance, but it's part of our fleet plan. Sergeant Reed had been using that vehicle. It has lights and a siren on it and tinted windows when we made that conversion, but that vehicle is there for the administration to use or for the code official to use in case we've not used it. We use our own vehicles, but I'm hesitant to let that vehicle go simply because if there was an emergency that one of our vehicles was incapacitated and we needed a village vehicle, I think it needs to be there.
So what are the costs associated with having another vehicle?
So do you have that quote with you? I know it
The
is.
purchase price, is $9,500.
Right.
Initially, it was discussed to trade the Focus in as collateral down payment. That was removed from the table, so the cost of the PD was $9,500.
And if the fifth patrol car is heading for retirement, what is and I understand, like, right now, it can serve as an interim vehicle. Is the plan that it would continue to serve as an interim vehicle?
It'll be retired now, so
So,
we will take it off the books.
okay,
But I think the expectation was that when 216 goes away, the next one that gets retired out of the 4 goes into its spot, coming from the new car in that position. So what the police department has requested is 5 patrol vehicles in rotation at all times. Just the really used one isn't in as much rotation as the other 4, if I'm understanding that correctly.
so 216 could not then serve as the trade-in. You discussed the Focus being a possible trade-in at one point.
Not at this
216
current time,
would-
because it's serving the role as a spare.
Got it.
When we move to replacing a patrol vehicle, we will trade that in as money towards the new patrol vehicle.
So 216 for this vehicle.
No, because if a vehicle goes down, that vehicle goes into service, your response calls the village. What we're trying to do is avoid I'm taking vehicles out of the fleet to go to Columbus to pick up equipment, or I'm taking vehicles out of the fleet to go to a background check in Evendale. And we're trying to avoid that.
So here's where we are with this. This, to me, the coming off of 5 or 6 years from where we were, the only people in the vehicle who had vehicles to take with them were the police chief and the fire chief. And then there was an administration car that was here for the administration to share. The fact that we have the K9 was something new for us. Not completely new because we had done that once before when we previously had a K9. So this would be an addition of another employee taking the vehicle and keeping the vehicle to use off hours. So I need council to weigh in on that. Secondly, it looks like this is a Dodge Avenger. That's an SUV?
No.
This is a sedan. Okay. I don't know that this is something that we're going to decide here this evening, Mr. Van Horn. I don't know if you want to have additional time to talk with your committee about it.
I have a couple questions too.
Go ahead.
So if you have this vehicle, do you keep your own personal vehicle, or are you gonna use this one as your?
No, this will not be personal use at all.
Okay, so you're gonna take it working back and.
This is strictly working back and then
Whether you go out with the family or. Okay, so you're personal use. And then, do you know how many miles you're putting on business, I call it business office, so. Like, yeah, any
I drive that Dodge Ram currently, with all of my responsibilities, I average on that Ram. The Ram has 7,000 miles on it. We acquired that about 2.5 years ago, so I'm averaging about 2,500, 2,000 miles, so it's about, we'll be about the same. Okay, give or take. Yeah, I was just wondering, because you gotta remember too, some of these miles are going on my personal vehicle now, because when I come in, those miles aren't counted.
And I just want to check, if you use your personal vehicle or Ron happen to use it for those visits, do we reimburse you if we?
Yeah,
I figured that.
I would fill out an expense report. My trips here in the village, I usually don't expense them just because they're small, but if I go downtown or out to the attorney's office or something like that, I'll expense those trips.
Okay, I figured that though.
And that is paid at a standard, federal amount. I think it's 58 cents right now, I can't recall.
It's like 55 or something like that. I've never submitted for that. I mean, it's an obligation. My officer calls me and says, I'm holding pressure on somebody bleeding out right now in the driveway. I don't really have the luxury to say, well, I'll slip a hours later. I have to go regardless. This is just something that will assist me, you know. I have to keep, you know, emergency responders in the village dog in my personal car, and then so be it. But this is just something that, you know, tremendously assists me.
Okay,
So this almost kind of like, I think, I'm sort of wondering why this discussion's here. It seems like it's a finance committee thing, what a council thing, what a executive. I understand we're, you know, operationally, you know, we need to make sure it makes sense, but I mean, is this something that's budgeted, that can be poured in the budget, all this kind of?
So this is not budgeted for the current appropriations. What has been discussed to me in this, the conversations we've had around this topic was that Chief Campbell would recommend using special dedicated funding that the police department has access to make this purchase. Even then, it has been appropriated within those appropriations, so we'll need to come to council.
Special dedicated, but that,
It's a federal drug.
is this appropriate?
The use of that is to supplement the police department in any way deemed fit by the chief of police.
So it sounds like,
Sorry, no, go ahead.
it sounds like for us, the funding part, this falls on that. That's not really ours. Our liability or responsibility is we are taking on the insurance for the cost. And then any liabilities that go with that, that's kind of what we're deciding on.
Yeah, I think there's another thing too.
Okay, all right, that's right.
So,
The liability and the determination of whether or not council wants to permit another personal vehicle.
correct.
Okay.
Well, and the other thing too is there are some additional expenses to this vehicle. So you would be tinting the windows, like on this one.
Windows are already tinted, they took care of that for us.
So then the lights and the siren on the
We'll
vehicle,
come out of that white car out there.
I'll do that short. So the only additional expense there would be whatever the installation is to take off and reinstall. Okay.
But is there any other special outfitting that has to happen to that vehicle?
Wouldn't it, I think my question was kind of answered in the process, was what Mr. Marks brought up, the standpoint of why is this in front of executive versus finance? But I think we kind of addressed that. And I'm curious to know what the administration's viewpoint is on this. And is this really, as far as making the right decision, was it how wise, whatever, anyway. Thank you, yes. The vehicle that you're choosing as far as 89,000 miles, because, you know, an unreasonable price and all that, is that the right vehicle, and does that fit into, is it a good fit? I mean, as opposed to getting something that might be, that's gonna kind of fall into some kind of rotation with the village and lower miles and not, you know, I mean, that's kind of high miles for a vehicle.
It's about 15,000 under the industry standard, and also coming out of another government fleet program. We know the vehicle has been well maintained, the records are produced. It's cost effective, you know, I don't want to come to the council and ask for a $30,000 vehicle, and that's not necessary. You know, we just need metal with four wheels to get it from point A to point B in the least, you know, cost effective manner, if that makes sense. That's kind of why this vehicle was picked. I probably went through about 100 vehicles, and our mechanic and steward auto tire repair. We had this one evaluated by them, and they made a recommendation. I look at the product.
It sounds like you're only putting a few thousand miles a year on that. Is that
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
So at an 89, you know, 5 years,
You're not looking at probably 100 miles,
right?
Correct.
Catch me up a little bit. What do you patrol in the village itself? Your current vehicle?
I do.
Okay, so would this be on patrol, or would this just kind of be the?
This would be more or less for my administrative duties. So
Okay, so you
I
patrol.
do public information officer, I do training, I do background investigations, I do criminal investigations, I do a lot of different things that take me out of the village.
Right.
Okay, and I have
So when you're
patrol
patrolling, you're
officers.
going to be in a different vehicle.
Yes, I will be patrolling a different vehicle.
That makes sense. Okay.
I don't have any other questions.
I get, my last little question, I guess, would be, do we have our, fleet plan? You guys speak of it well in rotation. Is that in writing or anything? Is it?
So-
is there a-
Yes and no. So the way that, real quick, I know we got other topics to get to. The way the fleet program operates is I have officers assigned to each vehicle. So when that vehicle is not in use, it's resting. That means that officer is off for their time period. So each vehicle rests 12 hours a day, 24 hours every 2 days. And that's to avoid overuse. The vehicle runs continuously all day long. You run the risk of excessive idling, water pumps go bad, they overheat radiators, things like that. And what we were working on and what the administrator has had a concern over, and I agree with, is replacement vehicles. We are at a point now where instead of replacing what we were doing was 2 vehicles at a time, we would do 1 vehicle at a time. So as he spoke of earlier, next year, 216, which is the oldest car in the fleet, is slated to go out, and a new vehicle will come in. And at that time, 218, which is an 18 Dodge Durango, becomes that spare car. And the following year, 118 goes into the spare car position, 218 goes out, a new car comes in, and so on and so forth. And what we've hit so far at this point is we will be on par to replace 5 vehicles. If we don't continue the K-9 program, that vehicle will then fall off the rotation as well. If we do continue that program, we'll have a discussion about that vehicle when the program is continued at that time, because that's an extra funding that we have to attain. And then we should hit a lull where we don't replace a vehicle for a year, and then we'll start over again. So that's where we're at with the fleet program.
It seemed to me, a couple of years ago, we voted to get 2 cars, but that was hopefully the last time we do 2 at once, or 2 in 1 year.
Well,
Is that something like that?
That was an emergency, I guess, emergency purchase they had to make. That was before me, so I don't want to speak out of turn. I'm pretty sure that was a 2.
Well, we purchased 2 vehicles in the last year or 2 since I've been here, but the idea behind it was we're getting really great financing and all the like, and then we had a vehicle get towed, which necessitated the need. Now, that second vehicle purchased in that year became the
This year's
vehicle.
purchase.
Right, okay, so we essentially, right. But as far as patrol vehicles go, the PD, go to Dog Manor, we were on a 5-year replacement cycle.
Okay. Yeah, you've heard me say, I always think of best practices.
Yes.
And look outside and say, what are the best practices for fleet?
Yeah, I like to get the patrol vehicles somewhere around 70,000 miles before they go out. That's the best practice across the United States. Most came from South Carolina. Their highway patrol is 75,000 miles. And that's heavy highway miles. Here in Gulf Manor, I think 75,000 miles is like driving around your parking garage at the mall. You know, most of it's low speed, a lot more idle than anything, which is actually worse than the mileage on the vehicle. So we don't need to go past 70,000 miles. We're currently sitting at 216, is at 71,000 miles today. That's why it's spared. That's why it's set to go out. But yeah, what the assistant administrator spoke of is the two Durangos. We got great financing on that. Those vehicles were together. They were available. We went ahead and purchased that. And before that, unfortunately, was the Explorer purchases, which was 2 at a time. And that was due to some very bad fleet issues. So yeah, we are on a consistent rotation that we should be good to go. The only issue I foresee is next year replacing the vehicle with the vehicle shortages. So
What is our decision?
So, to answer Mr. Simley's question, where the administration is on this is if the police chief, and by the way, Chief Campbell's not here this evening because of a family matter. So he wasn't able to join us. Thank Sergeant Reed for coming tonight. If the chief and his command staff believe that they need certain items to effectively patrol the village and run their operation, we support that. Our issue is, if there's, and it's always an issue, is that is it funded, has it been appropriated, and has it been planned for? One of the things that I want to see us have in our, as a part of our reputation, is we have very little debt on the books currently. Other municipalities have a lot of debt, and we've been very judicious in trying to keep that from happening. So a lot of that has to do with how well planned we are for the future. I think what would be helpful for council is, as Mr. Mayor mentioned, if there is a written policy on fleet rotation, so people can understand and refer back to that all the time. As I mentioned, my biggest concern is I feel like this is a cultural shift for the way we do operations, and I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that I think we need the partnership with council to make this decision. Now, the other thing to think about too is that at the time that the K9 retires, which is probably, 5 years away, maybe? So oddly enough, the chief just turned 5. Whether or not we continue that program determines whether or not we continue with the car. And
The four-legged sheep.
the other chief. And if the K9 does retire and we get a new K9, we would buy a new car to go with the new K9. So that's kind of what agencies do. So those are all the decisions and thoughts that when we're sitting down and formulating the budget that we're thinking about.
So what are you looking for?
Question, back to the debt issue. Are we carrying debt on the current vehicles, Bill?
On a few, not many. We just approved additional debt on a service vehicle at the last council meeting as well.
Okay.
So I believe in the police department, we are carrying debt.
Curious about what the situation is currently that I'm educated. So,
We are currently paying the vehicle from them.
Okay. So, follow-up question, the ancillary costs associated like the insurance, gas and all that, of this vehicle, again, kind of same question, would that be paid out of that fund or would that come from the police general fund or Manor general fund?
So consumables for this vehicle would come out of the general fund.
Manor general fund or the police budget?
With either the police levy or the general fund, wherever the funds are. There's a duplicate line item for, if I remember correctly.
So how insurance works for the village is, we have a total bill, and I can't recall what the total amount is right now. I'd say it's approximately $18,000. The 3 departments, administration, service, and police, share that equally within the budget. There would be an increased expense, of course, because we're now insuring another vehicle. The gas, the fuel, I don't think would be an increase because we're paying that already.
Right. In the form of reimbursement.
Yeah. So and that's usually more expensive than gas. Now, I don't know if that's true right now at 409, but typically
Gas is more than the lease payment at this point.
Yeah, I don't think the Dodge Adventure is a gas guzzler.
You got a Hemi?
So what are you looking for from this committee?
Well, if this committee is in agreement that you would like the administration to move forward on this, I would make a recommendation to the full, I don't know that you would make a recommendation to the full council. I think it would be helpful to do a voice vote, during your report this evening, you could state that this subject was discussed and you would like the administration to move forward to accommodating this department.
So does that require a motion in this body then to make that recommendation?
I would think so, yes.
Yeah, the only thing about that is like I said before, the appropriations aren't there currently to purchase the vehicle. So, if we want to move forward with that tonight, the earliest I can make those appropriations available for the purchase would be the next council meeting.
I'm not sure.
So does this need to go to finance then? Or is it not because of it being,
Well, it will go to finance in that I am amending appropriations.
okay. So from our standpoint, we're just making a recommendation that an additional vehicle be available for, I don't want to say personal use, but whatever.
Professional, personal use.
Yeah, there we go.
Exactly.
So you are approving the operational concept of adding an additional vehicle for personal operational use. That's what you just said. Yeah.
Okay, so we can make that motion second. Can I make a couple of comments on it? Maybe vote? Sure.
Sure, there would be discussion.
Okay.
So if somebody wanted to make that motion, then a second, then discussion.
So I'll make a motion that we recommend to council the acquisition of another vehicle for personal, professional use
Whichever.
on behalf of the police department.
I'll second.
Discussion?
And that's any discussion.
Yeah, I just had a couple things. I wanted to build on, because it fits together for me. I've been thinking on this, with everything else going on in the building. So Ron mentioned how we're having a shift, and I've come up with this thing in my head and say that we're really working on changing the architecture of something. And in that concept, I've been thinking we changed the charter years ago, and we're getting benefit from that. We may have to change our buildings. We're going to change a lot of things, and it's architecture that really is affecting. And I want to build on it because that is the shift that I think we're trying to do is we're actually changing the skeleton of golf band. We've been working with certain way for a long time. So when I heard that this is an unbudgeted expense, that's something we've been trying to change, and in many ways we have. But I'm not sure if with the police, do they have a budget set up that functions much like our budget as a village? If they do, okay. Because I haven't, when I hear it's unbudgeted, then it's okay. That's the first flag that we're trying to kind of put down. Unless it's something.
Yeah, this is unplanned. So, moving forward, I think administration and the police department would like to start thinking about future needs and expenses during the budget process in greater detail than we are.
Yeah, we've had great discussion about that. I think Andy would agree.
Yeah, I'm just saying, when I hear those words now, that's a change, that's the shift, and we want to mitigate that as much as the future, so if we can, I know we're moving in the right direction, but I want to bring that up, say that's something I want to pay attention to, and I want to do that. The last thing, I think, for me personally, the fact that this may come out of funding that's not from our general fund, that makes a big difference. Sure. If it's the general fund, I think would be a different discussion. That's just my own position. So, enough said. Anybody else have a discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of get some clarification on the discussion that we'll probably have with the chief, what his thoughts were as far as, his priorities based on federal fund, does he have the bigger plan on that federal type stuff? And where does that fall into this since it was unplanned, but seems appropriate? So are we in a good position in that regard as far as kind of budgetary?
Last I checked which was beginning of last week, we had $95,000 in that fund. Now, how the program works is we are allowed to replace an employee essentially with those resources, and that's priority number one in terms of how those appropriations are spent. Chief
What do you
Campbell?
mean by that? You mean like an officer quit, we can use those? funds
No,
outside?
so we are dedicating an officer to that program.
Right.
We're allowed to use those funds to essentially hire replacement officers, so it doesn't hurt our frontline staff.
Okay.
Which is how we use that, priority number one.
Okay.
What Chief Campbell has stated to me and Sergeant Reed as well, when I've had this conversation with them, is they are comfortable making the purchase. Again, ultimately, it's up to the chief.
Right. I think the important thing for us to remember is our issue here is not the financing of it. That is, it will go to the finance department. It's the concept of a village employee having another vehicle that they're using outside of the village. Right.
In lieu of their person.
In lieu of their personal vehicle.
So I will say, if it helps, the chief has authorized, and I've signed an agreement that the administrator has for that vehicle to go home. I've signed that agreement. I don't feel comfortable with a large vehicle outside of the village of Manor where it can be targeted in the face or anything like that. Got one of the great detail, I have surveillance in my home. I just don't want to take that risk in today's society where not everyone's pro-police, and I don't want to take it to where we can have an issue that we've seen in places. So I already have that blessing from the chief of police and the administrators to take the vehicle home. I've signed an agreement with the village of Golf Manor as well. I think this is just a better option for that response.
So this committee is aware, there's two things that we do on a yearly basis. We ensure that we have an agreement from any employee who takes a vehicle home, that they agree to abide by everything they're supposed to abide by and follow the rules of good driving habits. The other thing is we do an annual driver's license background check to make sure there are no violations on the driver's license, and that's required by our insurance company.
Any other discussion?
What did you say your anticipated mileage was? 2,000 or 3,000?
I'm thinking about 2,500. I don't think it'll change too much from what I do now, so about 2,500.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second.
Can we read the motion?
Yeah, motion to recommend to council the acquisition of a vehicle to support the personal and professional use on behalf of the police department by Mr. Simley, second by Mr. Van Horn.
Please make it.
Commissioner Marcus?
This is police state?
Yes.
Are we ready to vote?
Yep.
Members in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Any opposed?
Okay, motion passes. Okay, discussion on the PD medical, is that Mr. Reed?
Sure.
That's you as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been in discussion with the administrator in Deer Park, Silverton, about several things, about trying to provide an extra layer of medical aid and attention to residents when they call in their time of need. With that, we tossed around a lot of ideas, one being we want to send some police officers to become EMT basic certified to be able to provide that care. A more economically friendly and time-conscious certification is what's called EMR, which is Emergency Medical Responder Certification. Great Oaks will send us an instructor to teach her in the back hall to certify all of our officers here in-house. So we won't incur that extra cost and loss of downtime and such by sending them out. In the immediate, we have scheduled for Lieutenant Forrest to become a CPR instructor. What that'll do is keep us up on our CPR certifications and our annual refreshers. In that, myself and Lieutenant Forrest are also emergency tactical medical instructors, meaning that pretty much we can fix you if it's bleeding, broken, or protruding, we can pretty much save you. With that, we want to teach that material to our officers so that they can treat trauma in the field. while we're waiting on the response from Deer Park Service EMS. In that, we also are investigating AEDs. We feel like CPR AEDs, if we can stop bleeding, we can pretty much save your life. The AEDs are going to come with a cost of about $1,800 a device. We're looking at probably starting with 2 for the police department to be carried in the patrol cars by the army officers. We're also looking at some additional medical equipment, gauze, bandages, things like that, that we can fix you in the immediate time. Also, there will be a cost associated with some training aids. We need to teach the officers how to pack wounds, chest seals, things like that. That'll keep you alive until the EMS can get there and really do the good work. With that, we're anticipating a cost somewhere in the ballpark to start this about $4 to $5 grand. We don't know where that funding is going to come from, but as far as the training and things like that go, I can control that. I can start getting the guy CPR certified, CPR certified. Lieutenant Forrest will be an instructor next month, so we'll have that. Well, a little bit of equipment I do have, I will need some more. We'll have in service in May. I can start teaching these guys wound packing and basic first aid and medical. If the financing is secured and the okay is given, we can get Great Oaks in here and start teaching the EMR certification in June. So we can get this going pretty quickly. It's all just going to depend on funding and how we wish to proceed.
So could you repeat the cost of this, please?
We're looking at about between $4,000 and $5,000.
Thousand, not grand. I think you said 45 grand.
No, you said 4 to 5.
45 grand. Okay.
Yeah, 45.
I didn't say 40. I said
That's all right.
five.
And you can.
I was like,
No. The biggest cost, obviously, 2 ADs, $1,800 a piece, and then the rest is provided a quote earlier about $1,400, and that's just medical supplies and training.
Hey, Sergeant Reed, can you speak to I'm sure you talked about this with Denny Meter, the chief of Deer Park Service?
Yes, we spoke with Chief on Thursday. He is in favor of this. Actually, he started the conversation off with, do you have any? And I said, well, it's funny you say that. We're actually exploring that. So they are in favor of this. This is the direction he wishes for us to go. He says that EMR is not necessarily an immediate need. It's a great want, but the AEDs and the basic first aid, CPR are things that we need in the immediate future to be able to provide that level of service. And my officers have no issue with that. They're eager to learn. They're willing to help and support and keep this thing going.
so Mr. Manor, if I may, a couple things came to mind. There was a grant writer who was engaged to get AEDs for the Little Miami Fire District. I'm curious, and since Mr. Donlin has joined us, good evening, if we would qualify now as a public entity that could apply for grants to obtain defibrillators. Because I think if that's the case, we should do that. Chief Campbell, I believe, based on what Sergeant Reed and I have discussed, would like to put a defibrillator in each of the patrol vehicles. But I think what we're looking at is stepping into the water on this, having at least 2 to begin with as the startup cost. And looking at our funding from ARPA, that funding could come and does qualify for ARPA funding. So that's something that we could do fairly quickly if we would have council's, this committee's endorsement, council's endorsement to go ahead and move forward on it. What I like about this program, we had floated the idea of a rapid response team prior to our selection of the Deer Park Silverton Fire District to provide service. There were some inherent problems with that in terms of staffing, which this really doesn't get into the weeds on that, doing this, having our police officers prepared to provide that vital public service too. And I think this is something, if we're able, when we pull this off, we advertise this and we make sure that we capitalize on letting our residents know that this is an additional service be an enhancement to our new fire contract that we have. So,
The other thing I would add to that is when we were exploring this, Roger and I were exploring this with defibrillators, we're still members of the fire district. We needed to replace them. We received quotes from Stryker that were significantly more expensive than $1,800 a unit. They were in the ballpark of $18,000. So just to keep that.
Is there a difference in the ones that hang on the wall and the ones that, forgetting for the terminology?
Well, the defibrillators that the fire department would use are Stryker version 15s. Those were stored in the ambulances. I assume this would be the same style that the police department would like to use.
So the quotes have come from two reputable companies, Rescue Essential, which they supply EMS across the world, and Boundary Medical, which is actually a vendor of Little Miami Fire and Gulf Air Fire. We've done with them for years. The exact wording I gave was, I need decent units that a police officer can use. I said, I want to just dumb it down. And these are the units they provided. These are fully automatic. From what I understand, a police officer cannot mess this up. This is their recommendation. I trust the people that I got these quotes from. I think they're in the business of making money. If they could stick it to me, I think they would get that.
And this is, we're not talking advanced life support.
Correct.
We're talking basic.
We're talking very basic, bare minimum, can we do something right now to save a life?
No, we're short on time, but I was just saying to Mr. Lancer, I mean, we have two guys in the maintenance department that are qualified.
Every single one of them.
They're all qualified for emergency medical.
So we've
I'm not saying we have the guys drive their S350 up.
So we talked to, the police officers are in favor of it. I think it's just a logistical thing that around is probably working toward. We have police officers that are willing to help staff a quick response vehicle. I think it's just a matter of making it.
I would prefer if conceptually. If the police department is going to respond and assist with your first on a call into the village, I would prefer the police department.
No, yeah, I understand. I'm just saying we do have people that are fully qualified.
well, and I'm wondering if we should execute a memorandum of understanding with the fire district about how these officers would be used. Just that there's something that we can refer back to in case we have any questions or run into any issues.
Yeah, because at multiple levels, one would be our own insurance coverage and liability, just to make sure that we dictate and articulate very clearly what part of our responsibility.
Yep.
And then back that up, it's not standalone. This is there until they arrive. So it's in conjunction with a 911 call for emergency medical services. So if that's understood. Again, it's no different than putting the defibrillator on the wall in a room, making it available to people. And the ones that you're talking about, LMFRD bot, those are not only defibrillators, but they do EKGs and they transmit.
That's true. Yeah, they're full ALS.
These are no different than the wall units, so that's providing electrical power to stimulate until this advanced work is in there.
This replaces CPR. Yes.
Mr. Baker, you have a question?
Oh, sorry.
I just have a thought. If Lieutenant Forrest is going to be trained in teaching first aid and CPR, do you think he would be willing to teach the Gulf Manor residents perhaps once or twice a year?
So we actually discussed that. The answer is yes. I'm going to send him to more courses. There's like a Red Cross babysitter course and things like that to basically give him the skill set to be able to teach a variety of things to the community. So we could have the Girl Scouts come in here and take a CPR course or a safe babysitter course. There's tons of things I'm going to do with this, but short term, yes.
Great,
So,
that'd be a wonderful
yeah.
community.
We're gonna, we'll probably try to roll this out later. Yes.
And Red Cross will come in like simulators. So the dummies.
So that's a good question. Do we still have the practice bodies?
Yeah, we do not. So we price those out. A set of 2 adults and 2 infants, $8.99.
You have a couple of dummies.
So we'll need to get us some of those.
Yes, we have that. all lumped in with everything else, and that $5,000.
Okay.
Well, it doesn't sound wrapped up tight, but can we?
I think Mr.
Oh, I'm
Fisher
sorry.
had a comment.
Getting equipment and Band-Aids and stuff like that, we'll be able to get it from the Richmond, their part, the NS group to give us that equipment from their garage, and that's part of their responsibility.
So generally, you supply your house, so I think that, which might use that term, I think it's a problem. Because the equipment they purchase is same way with Element Fire, same way with Golf Manor Fire. They purchase just enough for their house, it's inventory by a captain or lieutenant there.
And so what we're coming to do is to help them out, really, their responsibility is to take care of them. So we're doing is just, we're gonna get there 5 minutes before them to help them out, so they should supply that equipment.
I think that they would look at it the other way,
Yes.
that we're providing a service above and beyond what they're doing. We want to do it, they'll pat us on the head and say, good, you're doing it. Yeah, I guess for me,
They're not
it's,
asking for it.
for me, it's,
No.
we just want to do it. If there's a 911 medical call, everybody comes, basically, right? And then, for me, it's us serving the residents.
That's really what this is about.
And everything else kind of follows behind that. I was almost a receiver of some of this type of service, and it's important. So I feel like I'm willing to move it forward with the caveat that every effort's made, as you already mentioned, that we're gonna look for grants and look for other funding as much as we can. I don't know if that's enough of a motion to move it forward somehow or not.
And we would hope that you would help us on that effort.
Yeah, no, I've got some contacts, yeah.
So yeah, that would be, so the motion would be something around the lines of the committee, what's the word I'm looking for? Endorses the village's, creation of I keep using rapid response.
The committee endorses the village's plan to
Cross-train the GMP.
Golf Manor, police department, and basic EMR.
Yeah, certification and basic CPR first aid.
Yeah.
Medical assistance.
And really, it would go to council, but that'll be probably a better wrapped up package, where the funding's coming from, or.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think that it's a good fit for the ARPA funding, and we're starting to craft what that report looks like. That's through the end of next month. The other piece of that is in terms, you talked about having this up and running quickly. What is your time frame?
I would hope the AEs, we can do that, and the CPR certification and some basic first aid by June 1st.
Okay. That's great.
How many hours is it for?
So
Could we put
CPR is
that
a
date?
basic first aid, we want to do about a solid 8 hours. And then submit service throughout the year, get those fresh skills.
So in the motion, could we put to target implementation for June 1st? Or
You can sure do that. So just one other comment, this is really interesting back to the future stuff. But, GMPD used to be part of the Gulf Manor Fire Department. They were actually members of the fire department back in the day. That was just before my time. But also, if you've ever looked at any history, Deer Park supplied life squad service to Gulf Manor from like the 1940 to 1960 time period. We did not have a life squad. They responded. Those little kids.
Yeah. Everything old is new again.
Everything's, it all comes around eventually.
Should we, is anyone endorsing this motion to endorse?
I'll make a motion for the endorsement. And this is really a good plan because it's really about the citizen.
It fills the gap that's been created.
The little gap, it's a couple-minute gap, but it's an important.
I think Sergeant Reed, 2 Saturdays ago, experienced that wait time as we were waiting for someone to work with a resident who had requested help from another officer. that even though the time wasn't that great, there was a lag time. And that to me is the fear factor that we're trying to address with this new process. So,
As I said before, now my son is the test subject for 911. I know police got there first, so to go there, we get a little more transparent. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? We'll voice vote. Voice vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right.
so Mr. Van Horn, based on the hour here, may I make a quick statement about the aggregation program?
Yeah.
So currently, this is going to come up to council at the next council meeting, but I wanted to make you aware of this. I'm looking for the right sheet here. With regard to aggregation, I guess everybody's noticed fuel prices are going up. We are currently coming to the end of a natural gas contract where we are paying, it's a little tiny print, 0.396 per CCF for our gas. That was a 3-year plan that we joined in 2019. We can't extend that. The new rates are coming out. Doing some research with our broker, Duke Energy is now charging 0.699 per CCF. That's if you just get your gas from Duke. And what they're proposing through the aggregator is our rate would be 0.622. So it's going to essentially double our gas cost. It is better being in our aggregation plan versus being out there at Duke Energy. A reminder that our aggregation plan, as passed by council in 2014, is an opt-out plan. So people can make written contracts with other suppliers. They are bound by those contracts until those contracts expire. But anybody who's not in a contract during the renewal period, it's like shaking a blanket. Everybody goes back into the Manor aggregation program until they then opt out. So it makes sense for us to join this plan for 2 years. That is what the consultant is advising to us at this point, because hopefully if gas prices, if energy prices stabilize, if the turmoil in the world declines and things do stabilize, the rate will go down from that. But that keeps us from having to pay the premium of almost 0.70 per CCF.
So we need to,
No, there's no action that you need to take this evening. I just wanted to make you aware of that because it's going to come up at the next council meeting.
This is the same consultant thing.
Yes, it's through Energy Alliances. That's who we have a contract with.
okay. That covers it. Next meeting is scheduled for Monday, April 11th at 6 p.m. A motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Is there ever any
I just can't help it.
And we are clear.